Why are so many Americans circumcised? John Harvey Kellogg, yes, the cereal guy, thought that it would make people less horny and curb masturbation, which he blamed for everything from psychological disorders to allergies. It caught on and just became the norm, and until recently, there hasn't really been a movement against it. Edit. Spelling. Dr. John Harvey Kellogg, 1952-1943, was a religious nutter in the U.S. that promoted circumcision as a means of preventing masturbation. And as we all know, all it takes is one person with a bad idea and a modicum of influence to convince other people to follow along. He also thought people should eat foods that taste good, so we invented corn flakes. 19th century pseudoscience claimed it would stop boys from masturbating. I was born here 54 of European parents, so I'm not circumcised, and what I remember from gym class as a kid is that everyone was snipped except for me. My son is not circumcised either. For my parents, it wasn't Kellogg. It was being Jewish community adjacent. A Jewish family fostered my dad at 13 when his mom was isolated for TB. My mom grew up in a Jewish section of Brooklyn, and most of her physicians were Jewish men. So naturally, when my oldest brother was born, because our parents do it to us when we're too young to say no. Cornflakes. There was a protest outside the White House against this just last week. I think it's just a money-making business in the United States. I really think guys should be allowed to decide whether they want their foreskin snipped. A baby boy cannot give consent, so it's essentially something like abuse, but is not counted as such. Circumcision beyond regions purposes is really an American thing. Most Asian and European countries barring Middle East have lower rates of circumcision. No offense, but I really don't think that a body part that's naturally part of the body at birth could be harmful enough to be removed. It's absurd to even justify circumcision. I am convinced that most Americans delude themselves into thinking that circumcision isn't a big deal and that it's cleaner. As someone who had to get it for medical reasons, I have experienced both, and I can say you lose a lot of sensations being cut. Also, I never had any problem with hygiene when uncut. Simply retract in the shower, no problem. Circumcision being the default is insane. Of course, there's a financial incentive to do it as well. I've also never understood the logic of dads wanting their son's penis to look like theirs. Why do you care? I'm 32 years old to learn that most men are circumcised in the USA. I think it might go back to the Puritans. The Puritans didn't exactly get along with the Church of England, which is why many came to America as colonists. I suspect, but do not know for sure, that circumcision was one of those differences, and then it just kind of became the norm here. It's a tradition now. Parents want their kids to be like them. Originally, it spread because doctors used to think circumcision reduced likelihood of an infection as a baby and reduced the chances of STIs in adulthood. The reason they thought this was because of poorly run observational studies. People who were circumcised were more likely to be practicing Jews and therefore were less likely to have extramarital sex and catch sexually transmitted diseases, and less likely to report them to a doctor if they caught them. People who were circumcised also tended to be richer because circumcision cost money and was conducted in hospitals which charged more money than midwives. And rich people have more time to care for their kids or to hire someone to care for their kids, so they are less likely to have their kids catch infections from dirty diapers. In reality, when controlling for religion and wealth, circumcision presents a temporary elevated risk of infection and complications until it heals, and then it doesn't have any significant effect. It's a dumb tradition, and people would rather blindly follow it than face the realization that their parents did something pretty cruel to them. I'm cut and wish I wasn't. I didn't pass it on to my son though. It permanently reduces sexual pleasure while giving small health benefits, which could be easily achieved by keeping it clean. It is very easy to keep it clean in our age as water is accessible everywhere. I don't understand how mutilating a child is not considered child abuse. It would be much harder to ban it in my country because of its religious significance, Turkey, but it should be banned in USA. People can decide if they want to have it after reaching adulthood. So glad that I am not circumcised, wouldn't want it any other way. I wish I still had mine. Back in the 1980s, that was the norm around here to get circumcised. It's growing out of popularity nowadays. There was a window of time where it was recommended for hygiene's sake, so parents got it done. Then the next generation was he should look like dad, and it kept going. Dr. Kellogg, yes, the cereals guy, believed that young men should be discouraged from seeking solitary pleasure, so he campaigned to make circumcision the default, arguing health imperatives. In fact, if you ask Americans, a lot of them consider it cleaner, which shows that the campaign really worked. Preventing young American men from pleasuring themselves, however, doesn't seem to have been successful. My parents were religious and it's the norm in America. If my wife and I have a kid, I'm just gonna leave his dick alone.